We see a lot of conflicts around the world, but the war between Russia and Ukraine, that one is on a whole different scale. It's huge, and it makes you wonder.
I mean, is it really just about grabbing land? Or is there something much, much deeper going on here? A tangled web of history, power, and big-time politics. Well, the reasons are super complex, but today we're going to break it all down. We're going to look at the history, the politics, and how this war, even though it feels far away, is actually hitting closer to home than you might think.
So here's our game plan. We'll start by rewinding the clock to look at their shared history. Then we'll get into the whole tension around NATO, which is a huge piece of the puzzle. After that, we'll hit the big turning point in Crimea, and then the all-out war that kicked off in 2022. Finally, we'll see how the rest of the world got involved and what it all means for you.
All right, let's get right into it. To really get what's happening today, you absolutely have to go back in time. You have to understand the deep and, honestly, very complicated relationship between these two countries. So for a huge chunk of the 20th century, think about this. Russia and Ukraine weren't even separate countries. They were both major parts of this massive thing called the Soviet Union. And in that system, there was no question who was in charge. All roads led back to Moscow.
And then 1991 happened. And everything changed. The Soviet Union just collapsed. It fell apart. And rising from the dust was a brand new, fully independent Ukraine, suddenly able to call its own shots for the first time in a very, very long time.
But with that new freedom came a whole new set of worries, especially for its giant neighbor, Russia, who was watching all of this very, very closely.
And right at the center of all that worry is one four-letter word, NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. So this group was basically started after World War II to stand against the Soviet Union. Its main idea is super simple but powerful. If you attack one of us, you've attacked all of us.
And here is where you really see the two sides pulling in opposite directions. On one hand, you have an independent Ukraine that starts looking west, getting friendlier with Europe, and even talking about joining NATO. But for Russia, that was a nightmare scenario. The idea of NATO, its old rival, having troops and weapons right on its doorstep, that was a red line they said could not be crossed.
So these tensions were bubbling under the surface for years. But in 2014, after a revolution in Ukraine that brought in a pro-Western government, that bubble burst. This right here is the moment the conflict went from cold to hot.
The year is 2014, and in a move that shocked the world, Russia moved in and took control of a hugely important part of Ukraine, the Crimean Peninsula.
And let me tell you, this was not just some random piece of land. Crimea is the strategic jackpot. If you control Crimea, you control the Black Sea. It's that simple. It's absolutely crucial for military ships and for trade. So by taking it, Russia completely changed the game, and its relationship with Ukraine was pretty much destroyed.
So after 2014, you had this kind of grinding, low-grade war happening in eastern Ukraine for 8 long years. But then, in 2022, Russia decided to stop simmering and just go for a full boil. That's when this became a full-blown, devastating war.
So in February of 2022, Russia launched this enormous military attack from multiple sides. President Vladimir Putin got on TV and he didn't call it a war, he called it a special military operation, and said it was all about protecting Russia's own security. But for Ukraine and most of the world, that's not what they called it. They called it a brutal, illegal invasion. And Ukraine's president, Volodymyr Zelensky, became a global figure with a very simple and powerful message. We will defend our country. And almost overnight, this stopped being a fight between just two countries. It went global. Major world powers started picking sides, and the stakes got even higher.
You could see the battle lines being drawn across the globe. Western countries like the US and those in Europe started sending billions of dollars worth of weapons and money to help Ukraine. Russia, on the other hand, was leaning on its own huge military. The conflict basically turned into a massive showdown between global superpowers.
Okay, so you might be thinking, this is all happening thousands of miles away. How does this affect me? Well, believe it or not, the ripple effects of this war are probably showing up in your bank account.
The economic hit was felt almost right away. Oil prices around the world went through the roof, which meant everyone was feeling the pain at the gas pump. And at the exact same time, the global food supply got completely messed up. And here's why. Ukraine is literally known as the breadbasket of Europe. They are a massive supplier of wheat, corn, and sunflower oil to the entire world. So when the war stopped all of that from being shipped out, it wasn't just a local problem.
Countries that depend on that grain, like Egypt and Lebanon, suddenly saw the price of bread just skyrocket. So when you boil it all down, what are we looking at? This war isn't just about one thing. It's a mix of everything. A fight for political influence, Russia's deep fear of NATO getting bigger, a battle over land like Crimea, and, of course, the huge chess game of global power politics.
And that leaves us with a pretty tough reality. As long as these huge issues of security, of territory, of who gets to have influence where, as long as those aren't solved, this conflict could just keep going. And the biggest question of all is one nobody has an answer to. When and how does this finally end?